Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the books that I read in January, which I had 10 books that I read and then I DNF'd 4 books. We are starting off the year in a somewhat mid type of reading that I'm at, but I'm happy because I'm getting books off my shelf that I no longer want. So before we get into today's video, please always make sure that you check my description box below for all of my links to my socials, Pango Books account, which a lot of books are still on there, and then also my Patreon and my Fable book club. And you can also get 10% off the entire Bookish Box website using my ambassador link below. Now, let's talk about the books that I read in January and what a January it was, because I had 10 books that I read, 4 DNFs, and even the books that I read were a lot of like 3 stars, and I had a couple 4 stars, and so I feel like I didn't start off the year too well, but I'm hoping that February will bring in a lot of 4 and maybe a 5-star read. The first book that we will talk about is Immortal by Sue Lynn Tan. This book I gave 3 stars to. It wasn't a great book for me in my personal opinion, but it also wasn't a terrible book. It just towed the line of it was okay, but nothing that made me want to read more in this series or read more from Sue Lynn Tan. This book, let me see if I can try to describe it as best I can, because you are steeped in Asian mythology, dealing with like Asian gods and their mythology and beliefs systems. Our girl is given a flower from her grandfather who is dying, and this flower is like the only flower in existence. She is also the heir that her grandfather had named before he passed away. Now the gods have came down to the village. They are wanting the flower back. She has it within her, so the only way that she can give it up is if she freely gives it. They cannot force it from her. So she is whisked away to go and see the queen of the gods, in a sense, to pledge her loyalty and her village's loyalty. But she is with another god who doesn't seem like he's nice, but he's also not mean. He's just very gruff around the edges, and they spark kind of a romance. This book is not spicy. If I remember correctly, there may be some descriptive scenes in there where it's in her thoughts, but I don't remember there really being any spice on page, but I could be wrong, but it's at least very minimal spice, if that. I didn't really enjoy the story. I felt like it was very lackluster. We're following our girl, and in her thoughts and stuff, she is like instantly attracted to this god, and there's no reason why other than just pure physical attraction. And all of a sudden, within like a few hours or at least a day, she's already in love with him, and it just seemed very insta-lovey. It seemed like the romance wasn't cohesive, it wasn't built up. I just felt like I didn't really connect with the story or the characters. I felt like it was more of a cozy read. There really wasn't a whole lot of high stakes. It was very low stakes, even though our author is portraying that there is this war going on, there are these gods against gods, there are things that, you know, will put you in danger, and you know, it just seemed like we were saying it, but there was no like action, there was no like on page. So for me, this book fell pretty flat for me. I'm happy that I read it because I do like Sue Lynn Tan's writing. I don't think that I'm going to be reading any more from this author. I don't feel like it's an author that like really connected with me, and the world didn't really connect. So unfortunately it's a 3-star, but I'm happy I read it. Next up, we have Visions of Darkness by A.L. Jackson. This was an arc that I had from NetGalley. I was happy that I got to read it within the week that it released. I gave this book 4 stars. I highly recommend it if you are a lover of paranormal romance. That's how I'm kind of categorizing it. I know that some people could say fantasy romance. I felt it was more paranormal. I loved this story. So we are following Arya, and Arya is a girl who is kind of in between worlds. So during the day, she goes about her life, but at night when she falls asleep, she enters into this other realm called Fedor, where she fights alongside her soulmate, tethered, whatever you would call it, and they go about fighting their way through these creatures and these monsters that are in this world, and there is a group of them. The soulmate that you have in this world, you are never supposed to meet in real life, because that would bring danger upon both of you. It would get you both killed. So you are supposed to not know really who each other is outside of the dreaming world that they are in. So as our girl is fighting during the day, her mom and her father think that she is hallucinating, thinking that she is suffering from a mental illness. And as any good parent would do, they are concerned for her, so they put her into kind of a psychiatric ward to get help. They are unaware of what is happening. They just want the best for their daughter, and I don't blame them throughout this story. And then Arya is trying to get free. All of a sudden, things go crazy. Her soulmate that's in Fedor ends up finding her in real life, breaks her free of the psychiatric ward. Things do not go very well for them. I loved this story. I felt like it had some gothic ambiance. It had some really good romance, excellent world building, and I felt like I was engaged in the story the whole time. I want to say that the reason why I gave it 4 stars was because I felt like when it came to our girl's past and who she is and why these creatures are hunting her wasn't fully fleshed out. I had a hard time with that, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment with the story. So I highly suggest, if you are really into paranormal romance and you like those portal fantasy type books, definitely check out Visions of Darkness. Next up, we have Beyond Those Gilded Walls by Jessica Taylor. I also had an arc of this from NetGalley and was able to get through it before it was published. This is a standalone. However, I don't agree that it should be a standalone, and I'll get to my reasons why, but I gave this book 4 stars as well. So we are following our girl, and in this world, there is this sickness, and once it starts festering in someone, they don't live for very long. There is an antidote that people say is in the castle where all of the elite and the royals live. So our girl is taking care of her mother, who has come down with this sickness. Unfortunately, she passes away very early on in like the first couple chapters. Her brothers who were sent away were summoned back after her mother passed. And whenever her brothers get there, they treat her absolutely horrible. They blame her for her mother's death. They blame her for everything. They don't want her in the house. They're kicking her out. And they told her that she needs to go and get a job in the castle. Basically never talk to them again. Just send them money. I will tell you, the writing in this is beautiful. Within the first like 5 to 10 chapters while all of this is starting, I felt myself wanting to cry several times because I felt so bad for our girl because she wanted nothing but to save her brothers. She wanted nothing but to keep them safe. And whenever she is leaving, she notices that her younger brother is starting to cough. And so she is worried that he is sick. So she goes to the local tavern, signs herself up to work in the castle as basically a servant. The story goes from there. She gets in there, she meets this mysterious man who is willing to help her. Maybe is the love interest, we don't know. She goes along through all of these court politics, trying to find the antidote, trying to find answers for things that are happening, trying to save her brothers because she wants to get recognition from them because she wants nothing but their love. This story is heart-wrenching. It is so good, very unique. I absolutely loved it. So if you like those very dark fantasy romances that have a gut-wrenching plot alongside court politics, definitely go check out Beyond Those Gilded Walls. Next up, we have The Mirror in the Mountain by Dana Evan. I finally got through my ARC copy like a month after this book was released. I feel so horrible. I just couldn't get through it, and it wasn't because of the writing and it wasn't because of the story. It was because it was the holiday time, it was traveling, so many things, so my mind was just not on physically reading, but I loved this second installment in this trilogy. I can't tell you much about this, but this world is a dark fantasy romance world where the first book is called The Other Side of the Mirror, where basically our girl is at the very beginning seeing that her family is being targeted by someone she doesn't know that wants them dead. So she is pushed through the mirror and into her best friend's home. Several years later, she ends up finding out that, you know, she can go through the mirror, go to this whole new world. There is a lot of triggers in here, so please make sure you check the trigger warning list before you go in. I loved this. I loved how it didn't shy away from the hard-hitting topics. It didn't make it a fluffy romance in the second book. Our characters go through so much in this book. I loved it. I cannot wait for the third book to come because I want to know what is going to happen to our two leads. And then also, I love the cast of characters. I love every character that we get the POV from or that they are surrounded from. I feel like the story is going to go in 1,000 different ways, and I think Dana Evan has created a world that is so fleshed out, so bingeable, that you definitely want to dive in and just binge these books. The next book is The Western Passage Part 2 Arrival by G. DeCarlo. I finally finished up this duology. I'm so happy that I did. This is a dystopian, paranormal, slight romance book. The romance is not the heavy point of this. It's more of the dystopian world. It is more of, you know, how are we going to solve what we have created type of thing. If you are someone that doesn't want to read about dystopian worlds where there's like a virus that has infected a lot of people, this may not be the duology for you. I gave this book 3 stars. I feel like it was a strong ending. However, I'm not happy because there's no more books that came after this, and there are so many plot threads that were not fixed. There really wasn't a ending. Honestly, I feel like this book should have been longer, or at least a third book to really wrap up all of those story plots that we started, but I liked it nonetheless. Basically, what this duology is about. There was this vaccine that was given to these soldiers to fight the vampires. Well, what it did was it actually created them into monsters, like zombie type creatures. So all of a sudden the world starts getting ravaged with them. They build these fortresses to stay in, and at the beginning of the first book, East Haven ends up falling due to these morphs, is what they call them. So our group of characters are on the run trying to make it to Ashland. Yeah, Ashland. They meet a vampire along the way. They meet other characters along the way that kind of band together. They are fighting for their lives as they are trying to get to Ashland. This book kind of gets them there and kind of wraps up a little bit of that traveling story, but there was so many things. Like, how are we going to solve the morph problem? What is going to happen to our vampire and our reaper? Just so many different things that I had questions about. But if you like a dystopian world that deals with a whole lot of different paranormal creatures, definitely try this out. I really loved this duology. I feel like the writing was amazing. I think this was a debut by the author. Definitely go check out. The first one is The Western Passage Part 1 Exodus. The next book was another audio arc that I had from NetGalley, and it is The Night is Defying by Chloe C. Penaranda. This is book 2 in the Nightfall series, I think is what it's called. I really enjoyed this. These books are very slow moving. Like, you have our female lead and our male lead, and they spend a lot of time just talking. There's not really a whole lot of action, so if you're not really into a very slow moving plot, these may not be the books for you. I gave this book 4 stars as well, and I kind of enjoyed it. I felt like we should have been doing a lot more action. There should have been a lot more high stakes at this point. I feel like we did a lot of sitting around, a lot of like spicy scenes. It was not needed, to be honest. I'm really intrigued to see where our author is going to end this trilogy and see kind of how all the stories are going to wrap up. I will say a good chunk of the middle of this book, I started thinking about DNFing it because it was just super slow. I couldn't stay in the story. I found found myself not wanting to listen to it. I don't know if that's just because of the story or if it was because of the audio narration, but I found myself being very bored for a good chunk of the middle. So if you are gonna read this series, please make sure that you know that it is very slow moving. They spend a lot of spicy time just doing that and talking, and there's not a whole lot of plot until towards the very end when things start ramping up, and then you're on a cliffhanger, so now you want to read the next book. I then read my Fable book club pick for January, which is A Kiss of Iron by Claire Sager. I was thoroughly surprised with this book. I gave this book 4 stars, desperate to get to the second one, which thankfully my Fable book club members chose to read A Touch of Poison, which is book 2, In the Shadows of the Tenebrous Court. So I'm ready to get to that. This is very, very good. Our female main character, she is married to a not so good guy. He gambles away their money. He is in a lot of debt, so it makes her resort to stealing at night on this road between villages. One night, she ends up stealing from this mysterious man. It's a jewelry of some sort. She ends up going back to her home thinking she'd never see him again whenever she is summoned to court. And all of a sudden, she is tasked with spying on all of these men who are vying for the queen's attention. And one of the guys she has to spy on ends up being the guy that she stole from. It goes from there. The tension is good. Banter is good. There is a good mystery in here because you don't understand why someone will want to do the things that they are doing. You're trying to find out what is happening. Definitely check trigger warnings because there are a few scenes that can be triggering to others where there is physical abuse, different things like that. I think there's even attempted SA in here. Please make sure you check that out. But I absolutely loved the romance in here. I feel like it was very well plotted out. I feel like the world was just so vast and lush, like you could just see it in your head. So I really love Claire Sager's writing. So I am so excited to continue on with the second book. I then needed somewhat of a palate cleanser, and so I decided to pick up Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is just an audio book. It is so good. I gave it 3 stars. It was mid because it's such a short book, but it is following 2 gamers from 2 different developer companies. Our girl works with a company that does a lot of role-playing games, so they're very good in creating these lush and vibrant worlds with a very good role-playing game aspect, where our guy works at another developing company that specializes in a lot of like combat and things that wouldn't necessarily be in a role-playing game. All of a sudden, our girl really wants to work on this project. It is the 3rd video game in this series from a loved book series that she used to read with her father. She is very ambitious on getting her developing team to be the ones that develop this game. They end up going on this retreat, and it is her developing company and his developing company. They are both there trying to work together to both get the contract to work on this game. It is about their romance. It is very quick. It is a very fast-paced read. I loved it. Ali Hazelwood, I feel like could just write anything at this point and I would just be in love with it. However, I feel like this book could have been something that was really stretched out, but nonetheless, you get kind of the backstory and things leading up to it. It was really good. So if you want a short, quick palette cleanser, check out Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. After I had my palette cleanser, I decided to read a book because I wanted to get back into my Viking era. So I decided to pick up The Road of Bones by Demi Winters. This is supposed to be a Viking-esque fantasy, some romance in there. I gave this book 2 stars. Okay, I do not feel like this is very Viking coded at all, other than where you're talking about the old god or you're talking about like certain names and things that seem very like Norse or Viking-esque. But our girl, her father ends up getting killed, so she is trying to make it to this next town because everybody is looking for her. She ends up having to go on the Road of Bones. She ends up hooking up with these mercenaries along the road and they don't trust her. She doesn't trust them, but she's trying to get to this city. And it is about basically being on this road and traveling. This book was so boring. This book had absolutely really no plot. There was no depth to the characters. The romance, like, our girl is pining over one of the guys in this mercenary group, and you don't even feel it. You're just like, okay, what do you mean? Like, I'm not feeling this. I don't feel the chemistry. I don't feel any of it. Why is our girl being hunted? It was just a whole lot of meh for me, to be honest. I am definitely not going to be continuing. I was very sad that I ended up not liking this. If you want a story like that, that's more of a cozy read instead of a action-packed Viking romance, you might like Road of Bones, but just know it is very slow and you do not feel a connection to any of the characters. And then the last book that I read before we talk about the 4 DNFs that I had was City of Gods and Monsters by Kayla Edwards. Sadly, this book also got 2 stars for me because it is an urban fantasy romance. And it is set in this city that has all these different creatures and humans. You have demons, you have witches, you have vampires, you name it. It's there. Our girl, she's human and she ends up going to this university, somehow ends up being with one of the devils from the House of Devils, and there is a mystery, there is a plot to find her or find this specific item, I'll say, that will either let someone create life or destroy life. So they are trying to frantically find out who is behind it. There is a lot going on. Here is where it lost me. It was way too long. There was a lot of just talking, a lot of nonsense, to be honest. I didn't really feel the romance. I know a lot of people are out there saying Darien Castle is like their new book boyfriend, which for me, I was not connected to him. I wasn't even connected to any of the characters, which is sad because I wanted to love this. I know a lot of people have been reading it lately and raving about it. Maybe it was the urban setting. Maybe it was the fact that it was like almost an 800-page book when it didn't need to be that. It wrapped up the story at the end. It could be literally a standalone and you are just fine. I don't need to read any of the other books because there really isn't a lot of lingering questions that I personally have. If you want an urban fantasy romance that is very slow, very condensed with a whole lot of nothingness. I know that I'm not selling on it, but a lot of people love this book, so definitely try it. Don't just take me saying that it's a 2-star and think that that's what you're gonna feel too. Alright, so we're going to talk about the 4 DNFs that I had this month. The first one is an audio arc that I had from NetGalley, The Beast We Bury by D.L. Taylor. I only made it 2 or 3 chapters in. I couldn't do it. I'm pretty sure that this is not the main focus of the story, but I couldn't get past this one specific scene. What I gathered in the first couple chapters was our girl can create an army of animals, but they have to be animals that she has killed with her own bare hands. Whenever we get to like chapter 3, possibly, maybe even chapter 2, I don't even know, but she ends up being in this like gladiator pit style tournament thing where she is having to kill a creature, and I stopped. I couldn't do it. I cannot listen to that. I know that I say that I have no triggers. Well, I found one. I could not read this, and I'm pretty sure that if I would have kept listening, maybe the creature lived, maybe she found a way to rebel and never had to make it a thing, but I just couldn't do it. So I DNF'd The Beasts We Bury. The next one that I DNF'd was our Patreon book club pick for January, and that is Never by Jessa Hastings. I made it maybe 60, 70 pages into this. I couldn't do it anymore. I know that this book is centered around the original Peter Pan story, so it's not like the Disney version or the romanticized version. It gave me the ick because whenever our girl goes to Neverland with Peter Pan, who has like basically slept with every ancestor that there is, including her mother and her grandmother, and then all of a sudden she's falling in love with him, and then that's gonna happen. I was like, no. I cannot do this. I am definitely probably not ever going to pick up anything else by Jessa Hastings because I DNF'd the Magnolia Parks Universe series and I'm now DNFing this, and I don't think Jessa Hastings is an author that I connect with. The next one that I DNF'd was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I could not get through this book. I was so bored. I didn't understand half of what was going on. I think I made it like 150 pages in. I didn't care. I didn't want to listen to it anymore. It's not that the writing wasn't beautiful. It's not that it is not a lush and vibrant world. I just was not connecting. I was not in it, and I just wanted to put it down. The last DNF I have breaks my heart in so many ways, and that is The City of Stardust by Georgia Summers. This edition from Fairy Loot is so beautiful and stunning, and I wish that I could keep this on my shelf. As beautiful as it is not a book that I was enjoying at all. I made it, I don't know, maybe like 100 and something pages in, and I just didn't understand really what was going on, because her mother is missing. There is like this Fey realm, and I don't even remember a whole lot of the plot, but I remember being like, I'm so bored. These characters are boring. This world is boring. There's literally nothing happening. So I had to put it down. So I am so sad to be getting rid of this one. All right, everyone, those are all the books that I read in January. Let me know your thoughts below. Have you read any of these? What are your thoughts on the ones that I DNF'd? I always love to hear your comments, but if you are not wanting to leave me a comment but let me know that you were here, leave me like a shooting star emoji or the night sky emoji, one of those beautiful things, for that gorgeous Fairy Loot edition of The City of Stardust. I will see you all next time. Bye!